All right, it started.
Hello, everybody. Thanks to all you that have come a little early. Just want to say hello, and we're going to launch in about a minute. And I see Suzanne's here, and I see Wells here, and there are others, no doubt, online. And just give it another bit of time. Why don't we just have a little meditation time, and I'll kind of talk you through it for a minute. So everybody that's online with us, please maybe close your eyes and invoke the presence of our Divine Mother and Father and feel their presence right now. And feel the presence of your own indwelling spirit, which is perfectly coordinate with all the other spiritual influences. And if you like, say a prayer of thanksgiving. Show your gratefulness to be a cosmic citizen in this evolving universe. Just take a few more seconds for some meditation time here. If you're just joining us, we're in a meditation moment here to get off on the right foot. Just a few more moments, and in these moments, why don't you, if you like, say a prayer for our session, that this session contributes to your soul growth. All right, everyone, thank you for coming on, and I bow to you, and thank you for being part of the Evolving Souls community. So I want to open up with a brief introduction to the community that I call the Evolving Souls community, and to the website Evolving-Souls.org, Evolving-Souls.org, which is the epicenter of our community, which is small but growing. And it's based, of course, on the Urantia Revelation, but not just the text, not just the literal word of the book, but the spirit of the Urantia Revelation, the very spirit of modern revelation. You might even call it postmodern revelation. So I'd like to invoke both the letter and the spirit of revelation in our time. And it would appear that the Urantia Book is the most salient feature of our current moment, our current dispensation, because of the outstanding excellence of the clarity of the text. On the other hand, we don't want to detract from the outstanding excellence of each of us, the inner life that's been conferred upon us. We bring that to any revelation, any text, any religious, spiritual, or scientific path. We bring who we are. So this is the more integral view of revelation, which is there's an inward aspect, your apprehension of this, and then the outward, the textual, and also what we can call the contextual, the context of the text. And all these things are important, because if we become too much focused on the word of truth, we lose ourselves in that. We actually can disappear into the text. And believe me, I've been there with the Urantia Revelation, because the Urantia Revelation is so compelling intellectually that it can eclipse your inner life in an ironic way, and you become so oriented to what it says about topic A or topic B that you forget what your feeling is about these things, what your opinion may be outside of the text, or what others say who are not acquainted with it. So the community here is is to move people through the text and out the other side into a liberal, holistic, ecumenical, interconnected field, if you will, of community around the pursuit of truth. And as Urantia Book would put it, the triad of truth, beauty, and goodness, which we're all in pursuit of. And that's really an inner quest. So we think of the Urantia Revelation as an essential reference text for that work. And it should not eclipse the larger field of growth of ourselves, of the planet, which is an amalgam of many different influences. So we don't want us to end up like some in the Urantia movement who become doctrinaire about this teaching, and may go so far as to ignore new truths that are emerging in our time. And these new truths that are emerging in our time, some of them supersede the Urantia Revelation, or complement the Urantia Revelation, or add new dimensions to the Revelation. And so I'm a little distracted because the phone's ringing, but sorry about that. The point being, for the moment, that I also would like to introduce to you my work in a new way that I've not done before. So just give me a moment to do that. They're calling both phones. Give me a moment to do that. Let me just start out by saying that in working on my book, Your Evolving Soul, I realized things about the Urantia Revelation that I had not in 40 years. And that's simply because I became focused on it for many months. And I came to see that I had actually had experiences of my evolving soul that I hadn't consolidated, I hadn't integrated. And this is an example of where I too my own inner life was eclipsed a little bit by the text, and I wasn't looking enough at my own living experience to correlate it with the text. But what I discovered in these months of meditation and writing is that I had actually had encounters with my soul. And in particular, if you've read my book in the first chapter, I had an apprehension of my soul in a near-death experience at age 8 or 9 years old, when I almost drowned, and I was pulled out of the pool at the last minute by a lifeguard. And as I tell the story, I actually was not able to swim when I was that age. And I was a pretty adventurous kid, and I just kind of leapt into the swimming pool, but I leapt into the wrong end of the pool. I leapt into the deep end. And I've been doing that my whole life, I guess. But I went into the deep end thinking I was in the shallow end. And when you do a thing like that, you go into a kind of paralysis. And I was actually in shock because it was a cognitive dissonance. I thought I was in the shallow end, but here there was no bottom to this pool. And then I began to sink, and I was flailing around because I couldn't swim, but I mean, I knew how to just move my arms, and so I could maybe go to the top, but I was paralyzed. So this was a moment of facing death in a few seconds of peril. And that's when my soul contents presented themselves to me in a few very moments of epiphany, even at the same time that I was paralyzed. Inside, I was no longer aware of space and time. I was actually aware of the imagery, the soul memories of my young soul. And my young soul displayed for me actual moments of my life and images of the people that I love, and in sort of condensed down into a few moments, but it seemed like a big expanse was portrayed to me in these few moments when I was underwater, and it was lit up and numinous, as they say. So that is in my view, was a presentation of the soul in a life review. And as I say in my book, life review phenomena that we now know a great deal about, but we knew nothing about it back then, are in these near-death experience accounts. These are revelatory moments where the soul is showing itself to the experiencer. Of course, these are people that actually went beyond the veil in a genuine near-death experience, out of their body or out of their mind, so to speak, in their soul. And this is a monumental phenomenon in paranormal studies, which is, as I was saying previously, there are new phenomena or new knowledge that's emerging long after the Urantia Revelation, which is exposing us to new truths that harmonize with the Urantia Book, or that amplify points in the text, or which supplement it with things that the Urantia Book doesn't reveal, because it doesn't reveal everything. And many times it says, this area, this particular topic is unrevealed to you. We're not revealing it to you yet at this time. But they reveal plenty enough. So we can work on what they do say, but there's nothing wrong with opening our minds in our search for truth, beauty, and goodness, to open our minds to things that are not mentioned in these texts. And this goes for every religion. All religions, boil down to conservative and liberals. And, we're in the liberal wing here of the Urantia Revelation, which is that there's a constellation of truths. And there's, at the center of this, for many of us, is a reference text. It's sort of like a physician's desk reference. The physician's desk reference, this big fat book that physicians can use. Well, this is like a metaphysician's desk reference, but a physician or a metaphysician is out there in the world having experiences, and that's what it's about. It's not about reducing everything to the text. So moving on, sort of the core message that I'm beginning to realize, long after writing the book, is that our experience is at the core of everything in this universe, just this very friendly universe, which is not only friendly to, but dependent on the experiences that we have moment to moment. Literally, these experiences, which seem ephemeral to you, which seem transient, many of which may seem not memorable experiences. This is actually the universe's way of growing through us. And that's why there is this inner trinity, which I call the soul, spirit, and personality, is a construction that is really like a systematic method of memorializing your experience and picking and choosing, to a certain extent, the worthy experiences, the experiences that should and could and will, in all of our cases, become eternal parts of us, and not only parts of us, but the core of us. And not only the core of us, but will contribute to the evolution of everyone else. And when we say everyone else, we mean literally the pool of all souls. The oversoul of the universe is the accumulation of all of and everyone's experience in a literal sense, because our souls are co-creative with the divine of this field, this oversoul field of all experience. And experience is progressive for a reason, because the deity is working with us for what I call circle making, so self-perfecting. There are two phrases I use for that. I prefer the phrase circle making, but for those who are new to the Urantia Book, it's better to say self-perfecting. Because our universe is, you can think of it like an arrow that's going in a certain direction. It's inexorably moving toward perfection, obviously starting from imperfection, starting from single-celled animals, bacteria, single cells that are planted on an evolving planet, It's starting from a very primitive place without consciousness, but it has the spark of life in these cells that evolve. And so this evolution from single cells to us, and then to more advanced cultures and civilizations beyond us, all of this is the purpose of creation itself. And now we need to bring in this higher dimension, which is the background for all of this, which is the central universe, the eternal mother universe, which is the source of all of us and is the kind of counterpoint to evolution. Because in the Urantia Revelation, we think of a kind of yin and yang, where the yin is deity in the central universe in perfection, and the yang is a rough and tumble, hard scrabble life of all of us, and all the planets, all the inhabited planets, starting really from zero and evolving to perfection. So again, there's this arrow of perfection that's moving through all of this, all of our lives, and our planetary life, and lives of other planets, and collections of planets, and local systems of planets, and then larger collectives of inhabited planets. And all of them are simultaneously moving forward to the omega point, which is the self-realization of the Supreme. And what do we mean by the Supreme? You know, veteran readers of the Urantia Book know this term, but even those who have been reading this a long time have puzzles about what the Supreme Being is. It's not easy to grasp. The Supreme Being, in a nutshell, is the summa, you might say, the summary of all of life, but it's also has its own personhood. So there's an evolving aspect of deity that is yet is a person, but the personality of the Supreme is not explicit. It's unknown to us. It is not truly contactable. Whereas in the yin universe, the central universe, the Father is contactable. The Supreme is not literally, you can't really pray to the Supreme. The Supreme is deity in the making, and we are persons in the making. So we're moving forward into perfection, just as the Supreme, an incomplete deity, a finite God, is coming into its perfect self-realization when all of us do. So these are some of the themes of my work that are more emergent for me right now. And one more piece I want to add before we get to our Q&A. And by the way, we've changed our format, and I'd like you to know that you're going to be able to speak to me. We're going to unmute you. Right now you're muted, and you're going to be able to ask questions directly if you like, and we can see you if you would like. And so when you'll be unmuted, and you'll just have to kind of assert yourself and state your name, and then let us know if because we can see your name on the screen here. We can click on it so we can see you, but that's an option. But we will be able to hear you. But I just wanted to leave you with just another way to speak about soul making and this theme of sort of the path of soul making, which is basically a path that is shown to us by the way of Jesus. Jesus is the epitome of someone who was on the path of creating a robust and balanced personality, which means a robust and balanced soul. But something beyond that, again, is the soul is perfecting itself, but there's something inclusive of the soul, which we call in the Urantia Revelation the personality. And so the circle-making aspect of this, or the self-perfecting aspect of this, is that the soul is growing, but then other parts of the self are growing. Another part of the soul self that grows, of course, is the intellect. And I like to think of the intellect as mind and body. So mind and body are growing into their own kind of perfection. Of course, we drop the body, but we're also improving our health as we go. And as we improve our health, that really is improving our mental health. And improving our mental health is a foundation for intellectual excellence. And so achieving this intellectual excellence in terms of our cognitive development is a separate line of development that's different from soul attainment, which is also a different line, lines going up in toward perfection. That's different than the line of emotional integration, emotional depth of feeling is a different line of development than cognitive, intellectual development. And the feeling part of the self is related very intimately with our faith, and the unfolding of our faith over our lives has stages of attainment. And so these are different elements of circle making. So circle making, always think of it as a great circle that actually encompasses all parts of yourself. At the core of this is soul, your soul evolution, but the soul is part of this more inclusive selfhood, which is all converging on a unified self. So the path of Jesus is the path not of self-sacrifice, and these biblical ideas of Jesus as a man of grief and as a man, kind of a harmless mystic. But it's actually Jesus's path is a path of integration of the personality, all parts of the personality rising up together and growing in harmony, rather than becoming an over-specialized on one area of your life, becoming deep in your feeling but shallow in your thinking, or too cognitive and not deep feeling enough. We want these things to rise up together, and as they rise up together, they converge in a unified self. And the Urantia Book explains to us that Jesus was the perfectly unified personality. And I puzzled over this for years. I mean, it really sounds like, well, what does it mean unified? I mean, but what they really mean is the inner life is focused and unified around a core, which of course is our indwelling spirit. It's our thought adjuster. It's the mystery monitor within. We're focused entirely on its guidance, i.e. its will, the Father's will, which is transmitted to us locally. It's not something off in the skies, obviously. It's within us. And so as we listen to this with increased skill and increased faith, we are growing a unified personality. Of course, within that, we're also achieving soul evolution as well. And these are all the components of as I see it, as the circle making, which is really the key issue here for all of us who are on this path, and for all of us in our community, Evolving Souls community. So with that, I'll close and thank you for listening. So now's a good time for us to do some questions. And I'm going to start out. I have a question from somebody who sent an email from Cyprus, the island of Cyprus, the Greek island in the Mediterranean. And his name is Christos Magidis. And I happen to be Greek American, so I love Christos. He's a longtime friend. And his question was, he's pointing to the fact that obviously we're all suffering all across the planet. There's a lot of warfare. There's a lot of difficulties that seem beyond the pale for many of us. And his question is, are we waiting for something to guide us in a proper way, something external to it, or should we zigzag our way towards perfection? He means by zigzagging, are we going to just kind of trial and error to get to our goals? And I'm just going to answer to Christos. First of all, thanks for the question. And I can hear you folks out there clearing your throats, getting ready. And you're all unmuted now. The Urantia Revelation is really clear about the fact that we are not to wait for an external savior, to come to guide us from outside of ourselves. However, on the other hand, they obviously love us enough to come and visit and to send incarnations. So they, of course, sent Jesus, but previous to that, they sent Macavento Melchizedek. And for those of you new to the Urantia book, that's a fascinating thing to read about, Macavento Melchizedek, who initiated Judaism, among many other things. So yes, they do send external teachers. And of course, we relish that. But obviously the main gift is what's here within and the endowments of our minds, just as mind, as the intellect, and the Holy Spirit which surrounds us, the Spirit of truth which is integrated with our thinking. And all of these influences are from within. And those are obviously the places we need to go. But, of course, again, something to be emphasized, which I've spoken about in many of the forums, is we go in a zigzag direction on this planet because of the handicaps and the deficit of having had the Lucifer rebellion on our planet. And for those new to the Urantia Revelation, know that we would have visible representatives of the universe government present on our planet, even right now, in the planetary capital, if it were not for the default of Adam and Eve and of the previous dispensation. We don't have time to go into that now. But in answer to Christos, in summary, we're suffering, but you might say the Calvary is coming over the hill because many gifts are being sent. A foundational gift is the Urantia Revelation, but there's all kinds of personal revelation that's pouring into the planet. And you can see it in New Age teachings and writings, but you can see it in the sciences, in the tremendous exponential changes in all the sciences right now. And we don't particularly see it in governance. This is where we really have to say a lot of prayers. So I'll leave it with that and open up the floor to others. I know that Alec Brindell had some questions. And if you'd like to come on, Alec, I'll invite you on.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to know about was why it is that so many people believe in reincarnation, but the Urantia book kind of says there isn't, or there is, but it's not the same way that we believe it is.
Yeah, Alec, I know you well, and I know that you asked the big questions, and that's really one of the tough questions in the Urantia domain, because the Urantia book does not teach something very popular right now, especially out in California where I am, where it seems like just about everybody I know has the notion of past lives and lots of detail about their past lives. I'm in a men's group where all the men except for me have memories of past lives. I have no past life recall. And many people do not, but many people do. And we have scientific research that's very significant now that would seem to point to the fact of reincarnation in a literal sense of people coming right back from a previous life and incarnating again in a different body. So here's a reply that I'll give that's brief, but I really want to refer people to my chapter 10, where I go into this in some depth, and it's an intricate argument that I make. And in a nutshell, in fact, if any of you are really passionate about this, email me, and if you don't have the book, I'll send you the chapter. I'll just send it to you, the PDF of the chapter. You can read this. To Byron at Evolving-Souls.org. The triad, what I call the inner triad, or the architecture of the self in the Urantia Revelation, states that the soul actually initiates not at birth, but at age 5 or 6, when the indwelling spirit comes into the self, comes into the person. And this is because the advent of the thought adjuster, the indwelling spirit, its advent is linked intimately with the fact that the child has achieved moral autonomy, the ability of the child's mind to make decisions when there are several options. And that's fundamental moral decision making that a child doesn't really do. The child is too self-absorbed and sort of narcissistic until this time when this intellectual cognitive capacity merges into the mind naturally. And then when this first real, true, free choice of the child causes, actually sends out a signal, believe it or not, to the central universe. Shows how much children are being tracked from the central universe, because the signal is sent out, and the thought adjuster it arrives into that child, and that's the birth of the soul. So we're taught in this cosmology that this is when the soul gets initiated. So the question is this a virgin soul? And the Urantia Book distinguishes that some people will get a thought adjuster that's experienced with another person. And I think you know this, Alec, we've talked about it, but for everybody else. So there's a thought adjuster that's not a virgin thought adjuster, comes into the self from this higher realm, and it has the soul record of the person that it previously indwelled. That soul record is not your soul. That is the soul of that other person. Now, what happened to that other person? That other person did not ascend into the afterlife by their own choice. So we're taught that you choose not to go on. In rare cases, people do not want to go on when they've come to the afterlife. This is a choice that's made in the afterlife. So when those people don't choose to go on at their option, the thought adjuster is the custodian of that soul, because the thought adjuster is the co-creator of that soul. The other co-creator of the soul is the mind, right? It's the person, the personality, the free will of that person that's operating through their mind is the other creator, co-creator of their soul. So that person is no longer existent, or we should say no longer alive, because they've chosen not to go on. So it's that person is no longer alive, but the soul is a very valuable acquisition. It's a valuable cosmic commodity, and the universe is very conservative when it comes to, as I said earlier, when it comes to experience. The universe values our experience, so it's not going to dispense with this person's soul. So the thought adjuster who co-created that soul remains in custody of that soul. So it comes with that record. Also, it comes with better skills as a thought adjuster, because it's had experience. So the thought adjuster is perfect, but it ironically can improve in its contact with us. So if you feel that you have a sense of past lives, the Urantia teaching is that is somebody else's past life, and indeed you can contact it. Now we may attribute to that past life, because we have the belief in this, that it's your past life. And the Urantia Book would say, no, it's not your past life, because you were initiated as a child at age 5 or 6. And now, finally, on this huge topic, it may be the case that because of the Lucifer rebellion, and this is apocryphal information, but because of the Lucifer rebellion, it may be the case that this system was derailed that is the ascension of us, of souls, was held back such that, or was blocked, such that souls do not ascend, but they recycle back to the planet. So this is apocryphal teaching that is not in the Urantia text. And you might say it's hinted, I don't know, I don't believe it's really hinted, but there's been a lot of lore about that. And I am researching that, but and it seems not unlikely that something of that sort must be the case, because the Urantia book, its teaching on this it doesn't seem to fit the data that we currently have. But we know that scientific data evolves and changes tremendously. So maybe the scientists looking at this are not getting it right, but it seems increasingly unlikely that they are wrong. And so that must mean that the Urantia book has not revealed everything that we need to know about this. And don't forget, the Urantia book says many times, this topic A or this topic B is not revealed to you. They don't reveal everything. They hold things back because they can't tell us everything, even in 2,000 pages. So maybe this is something they held back for a reason. I'll leave it at that, Alec, unless you have any follow-up thoughts or questions on that topic.
No, that's great.
Thanks, Alec. Maybe we come back.
Yep.
I know you have other questions. Does anybody else want to just kind of insert themselves here? Just go ahead and speak. I hear you. Is that Suzanne?
Yeah, that is Suzanne. I certainly don't know wherever I speak, but I always wondered if, because we all share the cosmic mind, if reincarnation might have to do with that somehow the person is tapping into the cosmic mind and there's some kind of interlay into someone else's past lives and that was lived, and that they're, connecting with that.
I think, Suzanne, thank you, because that is actually, part of my view, which is written up in my book, which is that we're just becoming aware that we have all of these psychic abilities based on the fact that we have a morontial soul, right? The Morontia Substance is the term coined for the soul. So that which is morontial in the cosmic mind has, let's say by the law of attraction, we can have an affinity with other souls that pre-exist us, that we may resonate with, in fact. So I think it seems possible and plausible that what you think is your past life is somebody else's soul that is resonant with your soul. And you can pull that in, download those memories, and come to believe it's your own self, your own soul. But it's actually a soul that you have an affinity with. And this fits also with the notion of non-locality, right, in physics, which is that really there's really no periphery. Everything is present here. It's not like all the souls of the universe are way out somewhere and so high in the sky. They're actually omnipresent, you might say, and we can touch upon the presence of this through resonance. So, and this is what remote viewers do, right? They're able to somehow find something that's remote in time or space through a kind of resonance factor, through other means. So I think that's part of the other part of it that has been suggested by many is that it's actually the gene tree that you come from, that we can move down the rabbit hole, so to speak, of the genetic inheritance and even the entirety of the genetic inheritance to find other persons that have existed. It could be in our family tree, but it's possible, and it's been suggested by many, that that's what we're contacting, thinking it's our past life, but it's actually somebody else's past life. So there you have it, long-winded. Thank you, Suzanne. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, just accept that or to add to that perhaps just through the cosmic mind and through the mother spirit, I mean, since she touches all minds and contains all minds, that, you know, perhaps as we just open up to her mind, that we can, as you said, through her mind, through the resonance, you know, make some kind of a contact. Similar to what you said.
Yeah, so, you know, certainly her mind is ancestral to all minds. Her mind is the source of our minds. And so the evolving supreme being in our local universe is evolving from her, and of course Michael, from Christ Michael's mind. And so we don't have to go out to the super universe level. We go to the local universe, to the local universe Mother Spirit, who is the source of mind. And so I agree with you on that. So this is a many-sided question. It's a really, actually, for me, a very fun issue, but I get a lot of pushback from my New Age friends. But I'd want to say to those who, from that worldview, that what I notice about the reincarnation idea is that it strikes me as somewhat as being our New Age recycling of a medieval idea from, you know, early Hinduism, which came to us in the 60s and 70s through many, you know, Hindu teachers, and it's become part of our culture now. And it's especially out on the West Coast, it's inescapable part of the culture. Everyone believes in karmic, you know, our karma and our souls, which are reincarnating because of our difficult karma. We have to pay karmic debt, and so we have to reincarnate. So we have to come back to kindergarten. You know, and so logically, you know, I should add that, you know, what is the logic? Think of it in cosmological, the logic of the cosmos. Why would the cosmos, if there's this huge universe out there with this ascension and you know, trillions of inhabited planets and all these celestial beings, why would they send us back to experience roughly the same thing again, you know, in a slightly different version? It's like having a kid go through high school and saying, well, you didn't really do it well, we're going to send you back to kindergarten. You don't send them back a grade, you send them back to kindergarten and go through the whole thing again. It doesn't strike me as a great concept. And I find that much of the reincarnation thinking is not well thought through in that regard. So I'll leave you with that. But thank you, Suzanne.
I have one more. I mean, it's really fascinating to me, too, the people that are so convinced. I mean, they can tell you with such clarity, and you know that they really totally believing it. You know, they're not bullshitting. They totally believe it, and it's just a fascinating psychic phenomena to me that in trying to explain it, because they are so completely convinced.
They really are, and I have them all around me, Suzanne. I'm on the very same page with you, because I've been in, you know, little battles with people about it. So I've stopped, you know, basically I've gone back with humility, you know, back to my own beliefs about this to question them. And, you know, there's a cognitive dissonance on this subject. There's other areas of the Urantia Revelation that I also have the same cognitive dissonance, for example, genetics. And we have got to be open to inquiry and to not be doctrinaire about this, especially when new data comes, especially with things that are more scientific issues that the Urantia Book says the science, which implies the cosmology, is not inspired. It's what I call heuristic. It's holding the space or filling the space so that we can build on that scaffolding. And so let's not be doctrinaire, and let's keep researching this. And with that, I thank you again. I see also Michael's on here, Jerry Dalton's on, and invite either of you to speak up. By the way, if you want us to see your beautiful face, let us know. We can tap your name and your face will pop up.
I have a question. If someone doesn't have one,
Sure.
I'm a new student to the Urantia book. I've been reading it for, I don't know, about a year now. But I'm also interested in what the apocryphal texts have to say as well. At what point, being new to Urantia book, and I'm still not done with the Urantia book, at what point would be a good idea to consider looking into the apocryphal information?
Thanks, Alex. A great question. Very important question that everyone's on a lot of people's minds all over the world, because we have a number of apocryphal sources that are really prominent. And some of you know I'm one of the main publishers of this material. And I have been an advocate of it. At the moment, I'm kind of pulled back on that question because I want to put in the foreground for our community the Urantia Revelation itself and my own recent work on it. And I have a future book on the subject. But it's a really strong issue in the active Urantia movement, to the point that it's politicized. And that's another reason that I have been a little bit silent on this issue. It needs to calm down a little bit about it, because it's this issue of being overly attached to the letter rather than the spirit. That the letter of the word of truth versus the spirit of the word. And if it were possible for celestial beings who love us to add more to the revelation by way of teaching us, wouldn't they do it out of love? You know, if you're a professor, you wouldn't walk into the first day of class and say, oh, here's the textbook, it's 2,000 pages. Just leave and go read that. And you can't ask me any questions. I'm not going to give you any lectures. Just read the textbook. You know, well, certainly that's not how education is operated. You need a textbook, but you need explication. And that's why we have Urantia conferences, of course, for people to teach one another. But we need more advanced teachers. And so it's been my view for many, many years that they are present and they are transmitting teachings. And I've been in many of those sessions, way over 100 sessions, and have published 5 or 6 books of such materials. But my view at the moment is, and has been actually for a while, is that a person really ought to read the entire Urantia book first and do a full reading of the text.
Byron, yours.
I'm hearing people speaking in the background, so you're not muted, so please, you know, kind of pipe down a little bit. In any case, lost my place here, but people who are doctrinaire about the text are on the one side of this disagreement, really. And then people who are too attracted to the new apocryphal material are on the other side. Sometimes they go off the rails, so to speak, because the anchor text, at least from my view, is the Urantia Revelation itself. By agreement by thousands of people throughout the world, by agreement by the wealthy people who have funded 17 translations of this thing. I mean, that's millions and millions and millions of dollars in translations of the core text. This is a valuable core text. So we have to do its due in its honor. So I would say that one should really know the book well before going into the apocryphal material. And that part of that is doing what we're doing here, or being in study groups, or going to conferences. But I think a fallback position might be this, that if you've fully read part 4, and have read books like mine, which are secondary works, and there are other ones you can easily find, and you got the full context of this, but especially part 4, then I'd say yes to looking at this apocryphal material. But I think in certain cases like yours, Alec, because you have such a big mind and a big heart, you're going to be fine either way. I think you're not going to, fall off the rails, because you're going to come back to the core anchor text. I'm sure of that. So let's leave it at that. But I think you'll get a lot more out of the teaching mission transmissions, as so-called, and the magisterial mission transmissions, which are not really published but are very much online. You'll get more out of it if you know the Urantia Revelation, because it's all context dependent. So that's a lot. It's a lot to take in, but I encourage you to be liberal and not doctrinaire about any of this.
Okay,
so thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? How about you, Jerry Dalton?
I got in late and I have to leave shortly, so I'm going to just remain a listener.
Okay, that's fine, Jerry. I see Michael's on. Did you want to say something, Michael? And Wells, are you on?
I think Wells dropped off.
Wells dropped off. Well, let's get back to you. You had a question about is the Urantia book slanted toward Christianity? You want to get into that one?
Yeah, definitely. Lot of. I have a Muslim friend that I was trying to explain the Urantia book to, and as I was explaining it, it just sounded very Christian as the words are coming out of my mouth, and it just really, I felt like I was sort of having to defend myself to him, because everything in his world is Muslim, and it was hard for me to sort of put this in a generic perspective for him to open his mind up to see it for what it is, instead of a very narrow focused sort of a thing. If that makes sense.
It's a tough one, yeah. I mean, I've been there certainly, and we have the method of interfaith or interreligious dialogue, and that's like kind of the number one thing I would invoke in these cases, where the fundamental method of interfaith dialogue, as you probably know, is you create a protocol in which the other person states their system, their beliefs system and faith fully, and you hear it fully. You hear it so well that you can repeat it back. And then the protocol says, then you have space to do the same. So you share your views in full, such that the other person really gets what you believe. That means they have to slow their minds down enough to take you in, and you have to do the same thing. Otherwise, it's just a food fight, sort of. And we don't, we're followers of Jesus, and we certainly don't want to get into, battles about belief systems, which are really human-made anyway. So that would be the entryway into a discussion with a Muslim. But as to the objection that the Urantia book is Christian, what and also to my New Age friends who also object, I call them the ABJ folks, the anything but Jesus people that seem to abound in Northern California. They're into Hinduism, Buddhism, but Jesus would leave that out. The ABJ folks. Well, I say the Urantia book is not actually Christian. It's Jesusonian. In fact, the Urantia book is highly critical of Christianity. It takes apart statements in the New Testament and states flat out they're wrong. And in particular, the core doctrine, just about the core doctrine of Christianity, is stated to be wrong, and that's the atonement, blood atonement of Christ, and that's stated to be not only wrong but childish and backwards. There's even a worse term they use. So it criticizes the apostles and how they apprehended the Urantia book, to the point that it says it isn't the gospel that they taught is the wrong gospel. It's the gospel about Jesus, not the gospel of Jesus. They don't even teach you his teachings. They teach you, an ideology about him, about his death, resurrection, and his sacrifice for our salvation based on this thing called original sin, which is a made-up doctrine. It's not even a proper, it's not even there in the Old Testament, really. It's a doctrine that Paul almost concocted. So so it shouldn't be linked to historic Christianity in the minds of a Muslim. Now it is in other ways obviously linked to historical Christianity, wherein it affirms certain doctrines, certain teachings that we have that are in many ways buried in Christianity. The notion of the indwelling spirit is buried. The notion of perfection is there. It's 4 or 5 statements in the New Testament about moving toward becoming perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect. Those statements are there, but they're not emphasized. And certainly the notion of a divine spark within is stated, the kingdom of God is within, but it's mainly ignored. But those are really the 2 key teachings in the Urantia Revelation that is really in the background in most Christianity, and it's quite a shame. So, for what it's worth, you might go back to your Muslim friend and say, well, it's not even that Christianity that you're talking about, which was historically, carried on these crazy crusades, 4 crusades, and they, massacred Muslims. This is not what Jesus taught, not even remotely close to, the nonviolent, tolerant, loving, forgiving teachings of Jesus. So, what he calls Christianity is what the Urantia Book calls a mistake.
Right.
In certain ways. So there you go. Another long-winded answer, but I hope that helps.
Absolutely, it does. Thank you.
This notion of dialogue with, in my case, I'm in constant dialogue with New Age people. And as a book publisher, sometimes I publish their books. And what we can do with them is the same thing. They have, interestingly enough, have brought forward truths that are in the Urantia Revelation that are not strongly emphasized in the Bible and in Christianity, which is especially the notion of a higher self, the notion of divinity within. That is very strong in current sort of popular New Age thought. And, that was probably planted by the angels to make sure that truth wasn't lost on planet Earth, because it was becoming lost. By the 40s and 50s, people were in despair and nihilistic existentialism. They didn't believe that man was totally fallen. So in the 60s, this truth was brought to us from India mainly, and from Buddhism and Taoism that came, kind of out of the blue and brought this forward. However, notice the fact that none of those Eastern teachings, understand a loving Father, Mother, God, except in some parts of Buddhism they do. But for the most part, it's an impersonal entity. And so that's missing in many of those teachings. But Islam, interestingly enough, has a brilliant, clear-cut version of a loving Father, Allah. So, to its credit, they preserve that teaching that really goes back to Melchizedek and to the prophets that they follow. They follow, of course, all the prophets from Moses to all the way to the Hebrew prophets like Isaiah, and then, of course, Jesus. They follow them, which they all were monotheists. So they've brought forward the transcendent God, whereas Eastern thought has brought forward the immanent, the interior God. And so now we're putting these two together. And from one point of view, you don't particularly need the Urantia revelation to do that, because that teaching of panentheism, as we call it, not pantheism, but panentheism, God within and God transcendent. That teaching has been recovered in many forms without the Urantia Revelation. It's in much of Christian theology and in some Hindu thought, especially the Hindu thought that derives from Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo. And so we're fortunate that these things are rising together and converging. And the Urantia book comes forward with more advanced cosmology to greatly enhance all of that and bring it home to a much bigger universe than any of them had ever conceived could be possible. The ascension to paradise, far beyond any existing teaching on the planet. There's nothing even close to that in any text that I'm aware of. And the notion of the evolving soul is also not present in any teaching that I've seen. And I review that in a section of my book, all the other teachings about the soul. And we have a robust teaching about the evolving soul as well. So I guess we'll leave it there unless anybody else has a question or a statement. I guess not. You know, I want to close with something which is a tribute. I'd like to give a tribute to a friend of mine who passed away. His name is Timothy Wiley. And Timothy was also a friend of Alex, who's been on the program today. Timothy Wiley was a very important Urantia book student who was part of the liberal tradition and who authored a number of books. I'm going to show one of them on the screen. Some of you may know about this series called the Rebel Spirit or Rebel Angel series. There are 8 volumes. 5 have been published, and one in the pipeline, 2 more to come, posthumously to be published. And this is an apocryphal revelation by a very advanced and very astute and really a man who's a literary genius, who did transmit this apocryphal material about the prehistory of our planet and what happened after the Lucifer rebellion, between that period of time and all the way down to the time of Christ, and particularly down to the time of Adam and Eve. And I commend to you the work of Timothy Wiley, that's W-Y-L-L-I-E. His many books are very deeply inspiring, and I published one of them some time ago. I don't have it handy, but it's called Adventures Among Spiritual Intelligences. So thank you, Timothy Wiley, if you're listening. We love you and we miss you, and we all look forward, or I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you for the way you blessed us and the way your wisdom enveloped us when you were here on Earth, on Urantia. Thank you, Timothy Wiley. So I'll leave you with that tonight, everybody, and we'll speak with you again soon.